Have you ever had one of those days where everything goes wrong for Miranda Olson, a 24-year-old law student juggling classes and waiting tables that day, was about to redefine her entire life? It wasn't just about spilling a drink or getting a bad tip. It was about a single soul-crushing encounter in the gilded dining room of one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. She stood up for her dignity against a man who could buy the entire city block, and for that she was thrown out like garbage. But her story doesn't end there. It ends with a lesson that the powerful often forget. The person you step on today might be the one who brings your entire empire crashing down tomorrow. The air in Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign tasted of money. It was a subtle blend of vintage leather, expensive perfume, and the faintest, most tantalizing aroma of truffle oil and seared scallops. For Miranda Olson, it was the smell of survival. Every perfectly polished wine glass, every meticulously folded napkin, was a step towards finishing her law degree and a step away from the crushing medical bills that had become the backdrop of her life. Her younger sister Zoe was the reason she endured the 6-inch heels, the condescending patrons, and the saccharine soul-selling smile she had perfected. Zoe, with her luminous eyes and a spirit too bright for any hospital room, was fighting a battle that required more than just courage. It required cash, and lots of it. So Miranda served, she smiled, and she studied reciting tort law in her head while describing the notes of a 1982 Bordeaux. Tonight was different. A palpable tension crackled through the dining room. Mr. Gerard, the owner, a man whose spine seemed to be made of gelatin, scurried around with a sheen of sweat on his brow. "He's coming," he'd hissed to the staff earlier. "Hubert Calloway, table 7, flawless service, or I'll have all your hides." Hubert Calloway wasn't just rich. He was a force of nature, a tech mogul who had clawed his way to the top of the Forbes list with a ruthlessness that was legendary. His company, Calloway Innovations, was a behemoth, its logo plastered on everything from smart homes to military drones. He was known for two things: his genius and his temper. When he arrived, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He was handsome, in a severe, sculpted way, with eyes the color of a winter sky and a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite. He was with a willowy blonde Bridget who looked less like a companion and more like an accessory. Miranda was assigned his table. "Breathe," she told herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. He's just a man. But he wasn't. From the moment she approached, Calloway treated her not as a person, but as a function. He didn't look at her snapping his fingers for water. He critiqued her description of the specials with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Just bring me the Wagyu medium rare, and a bottle of the Petrus, the Aero 9. He said it without glancing at the wine list, a power move designed to intimidate. Miranda maintained her composure, her years of practice kicking in. "An excellent choice, sir," she said, her voice even and professional. The evening wore on a tightrope walk of high-stakes service. Miranda moved with a dancer's grace, anticipating every need, her smile never faltering. She refilled Bridget's water-cleared plates with silent efficiency and ensured their experience was, as Mr. Gerard demanded, flawless. The spark that lit the fuse was impossibly small. As Miranda was pouring Calloway a glass from the hideously expensive bottle of wine, a busboy rushing past jostled her arm. It was a minor bump, but a few drops of crimson liquid worth more than her entire shift's pay splashed onto the pristine, white tablecloth near Calloway's hand. Mortification washed over Miranda. "My deepest apologies, sir." She began dabbing at the spot with a clean napkin. "I am so sorry." Calloway, who had been engrossed in his phone, looked up. His icy eyes didn't look at the spot. They locked directly onto hers. A slow, cruel smile played on his lips. "Sorry," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "You're sorry." He picked up his own glass, swirling the contents. "You people, you stumble through life, leaving a trail of incompetence, and all you can offer is sorry." Bridget shifted uncomfortably. "Hubert, it was an accident." "Quiet." He snapped his gaze, still drilling into Miranda. "Tell me what's your name." "Miranda, sir." "Miranda," he repeated, tasting the name as if it were something foul. "You know what your problem is, Miranda. You lack attention to detail. It's the plague of your generation. You want the reward without the effort." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I bet you're one of those people who thinks the world owes them something. A little artist, maybe, or a student wasting your parents' money on some useless degree in communications, while you spill wine on people who actually contribute to society." Every word was a calculated strike, designed to humiliate. Miranda felt the blood drain from her face, but then something else rose in its place, a cold, hard anger. He didn't just insult her, he insulted her struggle, the very sacrifice she was making for Zoe. The image of her sister, pale but smiling in her hospital bed, flashed in her mind. And Miranda Olson, the deferential waitress, vanished. In her place stood Miranda Olson, future lawyer. She straightened up her spine, no longer bent in apology, but rigid with defiance. She looked him directly in the eye, her professional smile gone replaced by a calm, unassailable composure. "Sir," she said, her voice low but clear, ringing with an authority that stunned the table into silence. "My attention to detail is the only reason your water glass has remained full, your table cleared, and your every need met for the last hour and a half, despite your continued rudeness. My useless degree, as you call it, is in law, and it's teaching me that dignity isn't determined by the size of one's bank account." She paused, letting the words hang in the suddenly silent air. "The spill was an accident for which I have apologized. Your behavior, however, is a choice, and it is a poor one." The silence that followed was absolute. Bridget's jaw was on the floor. Calloway's face, for the first time, registered an emotion other than arrogance, pure, undiluted fury. His features hardened, and a vein pulsed in his temple. No one had ever spoken to him like that. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping violently against the floor. "Gerard," he roared, his voice echoing through the opulent dining room. Heads turned at every table. Mr. Gerard was there in a flash, his face a mask of terror. "Mr. Calloway, is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right," Calloway snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Miranda. "This insolent little brat, she just insulted me, to my face." Gerard's eyes, wide with panic, darted to Miranda. "Miranda, apologize to Mr. Calloway this instant." But Miranda stood her ground. "I have nothing to apologize for. I stated facts." That was it. The final nail. For a man like Calloway, the refutation was worse than the initial offense. It was a challenge to his absolute authority. "You hear that?" Calloway said to Gerard, his voice dangerously low. "Fire her. Fire her right now, or I will not only never set foot in this establishment again, I will personally see to it that every single person I know boycotts this place into bankruptcy. I will destroy you." It was not an idle threat, it was a promise. Mr. Gerard looked at Miranda, his eyes pleading. "Miranda, please!" "No," she said softly, her gaze locked on Calloway. Gerard's face crumpled. He turned to her, his voice barely a whisper, thick with a pathetic mix of fear and anger. "You're fired, Miranda. Get your things. Get out. Now." Humiliation, hot and sharp, finally pierced through her anger. She was fired, in front of the entire restaurant, for defending herself. She could feel the stares of the other patrons, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She looked at Calloway one last time. He was smirking, a look of triumphant cruelty on his face. He had won. He had crushed the insect that dared to buzz in his presence. Without another word, Miranda turned and walked away. She didn't run. She walked with her head held high past the whispers and the stares, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous room. She walked out of Aurelia, out of the smell of money and truffles, and into the cool night air, the weight of her sister's medical bills, her lost job, and a burning sense of injustice pressing down on her shoulders. The billionaire had won the battle, but as the city lights blurred through her tears, Miranda Olson made a vow. The war was just beginning. The walk home was a blur of streetlights and shame. Each step on the cracked pavement felt like a blow. The carefully constructed walls of her life, waitress by night, student by day, caregiver, always had been sledgehammered into rubble by one man's ego. When she finally reached her small third-floor walk-up, the apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cell. The stack of law books on her desk seemed to mock her. What good is learning the law if you can't even protect yourself? She sank onto her lumpy sofa, the key to her locker at Aurelia still clutched in her hand. It felt cold and heavy, a relic from a life that had ended 2 hours ago. The first person she wanted to call was Zoe, but she couldn't. She couldn't let her sister hear the defeat in her voice. Zoe needed her to be strong. So Miranda did the only thing she could. She let herself cry. She cried for the job she needed, for the injustice of it all, for the sheer suffocating powerlessness she felt. She cried until there were no tears left, leaving only a hollow ache in her chest and a cold, simmering rage in her gut. It was in that hollow space that a new thought began to form. It started as a whisper, a line from her labor law textbook. She sat up, wiping her eyes, and walked over to the desk. She flipped through the heavy tome, her fingers tracing the words on the page. Wrongful termination, hostile work environment, retaliation. Mr. Gerard hadn't just fired her. He had fired her at the public, humiliating behest of a patron as a direct result of her refusing to endure verbal abuse. Calloway had created a hostile environment, and Gerard, by firing her to appease him, had acted on it. Was it a long shot? Yes. Would it be her word against a billionaire's? Absolutely. But it was something. Her mind raced. Who could she turn to? She was a student. She couldn't afford a lawyer. Then a name came to her. Professor Anya Sharma. Professor Sharma was the head of the university's legal aid clinic and her advanced civil procedure professor. She was a brilliant, formidable woman in her late 40s, with a reputation for being as tough as she was fair. She had a particular disdain for corporate bullies and had once spent an entire lecture dissecting a case where a mega-corporation had been brought to its knees by a single, determined plaintiff. Never underestimate the power of a well-pleaded complaint, she'd said, her dark eyes scanning the lecture hall. It's the great equalizer. With a surge of adrenaline that pushed aside her exhaustion, Miranda opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pouring out the entire story in an email to Professor Sharma. She detailed every sneer from Calloway, every word of their final exchange, Gerard's panicked compliance, and the final crushing humiliation. She hit send just after 2 a.m., her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope. She didn't expect a reply until morning, if at all. Her phone buzzed less than 10 minutes later. From Anya Sharma. Subject: re-urgent legal question. Miranda Olson. Message my office. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Miranda stared at the screen, a fresh wave of tears welling in her eyes. This time they weren't tears of despair. The next morning, Miranda walked into the legal aid clinic looking like she'd been through a war. She hadn't slept, and her eyes were puffy, but she was dressed in her most professional blouse and carried a notebook filled with meticulously written notes. Professor Sharma's office was neat and functional, lined with books on law and social justice. Sharma herself sat behind a large oak desk, a steaming mug of tea in her hand. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit," she said, her tone neutral. "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." Miranda recounted the story again, her voice steadier this time. Sharma listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer sympathy or outrage. She just listened. Her fingers steepled her sharp gaze, never leaving Miranda's face. When Miranda finished, the professor was silent for a long moment. Miranda's stomach twisted into a knot. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she'd be told to move on, that it was a hopeless case. "Hubert Calloway," Sharma finally said, her voice a low murmur. She swiveled in her chair and typed his name into her computer. His lead counsel is the firm of Cromwell, Dane and Associates. Leonard Cromwell himself, I'd imagine. They are sharks. They eat cases like this for breakfast. Miranda's heart sank. "Mr. Gerard," Sharma continued, "is the owner of Aurelia LLC. I've looked up his business records. The restaurant is his only major asset. He's leveraged to the hilt." She turned back to face Miranda. "He's vulnerable. Calloway is not." "So, it's hopeless," Miranda whispered. Professor Sharma took a slow sip of her tea. A flicker of something, a glint of a challenge appeared in her eyes. "Hopeless, Miss Olson, hopeless, is a word used by those who have already lost. The law is a weapon. The question is whether you have the nerve to wield it. This won't be easy. They will try to bury you. They will dig into your life, your family, your finances. They will try to paint you as a disgruntled, incompetent employee looking for a payday. Are you prepared for that?" Miranda thought of Zoe. She thought of Calloway's smug, triumphant face. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "I am." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Professor Sharma's lips. "Good, because this is no longer just about your wrongful termination. Calloway's actions and Gerard's spineless compliance point to a pattern. Bullies like Calloway don't just act out once. Restaurants that bend to that kind of pressure often cut corners elsewhere." She leaned forward, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "We are not just going to sue for wrongful termination. We're going on a fishing expedition. We're going to subpoena employee records, payroll tip-out sheets. I have a suspicion, Miss Olson, that Mr. Gerard's flawless restaurant might have some very flawed labor practices. And if we can prove a pattern of wage theft or illegal tip pooling, this becomes a much bigger problem for him. A problem big enough that he might just be willing to testify against the man who put him in this position." Miranda felt a thrill run through her. This was beyond anything she had imagined. It wasn't just revenge, it was strategy. It was the law in action. "The clinic will represent you pro bono," Sharma said, standing up. "I'll handle the filings myself. Your job is twofold. First, write down every single detail you can remember about your employment. Every late closing, every conversation about tips, every co-worker's name. Second, I need you to understand that from this moment on, you are no longer just a victim. You are a plaintiff. You are the engine of this case. It will be your courage that sees it through." She walked to the door and opened it. "Now go get some rest. I will be drafting a demand letter to Mr. Gerard that should make his morning coffee taste like battery acid. By this afternoon, both he and Mr. Calloway will know your name again. But this time, It won't be as a waitress they can discard. It will be as the adversary they never saw coming. Miranda walked out of the office and into the hallway, the weight on her shoulders feeling lighter than it had in years. The shame was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. Professor Sharma was right. She wasn't just a fired waitress anymore. She was a plaintiff, and the fight had just begun. The following afternoon, David Gerard was in his office at Aurelia, attempting to soothe his frayed nerves with a glass of scotch. The Calloway incident had left him shaken. He'd sacrificed a decent employee, yes, but he'd saved his business. Hubert Calloway was a kingmaker in this city, and his patronage was worth more than a dozen waitresses. Gerard justified his actions as a pragmatic business decision, a bitter pill he had to swallow. He was just starting to believe it when his hostess knocked and entered, holding a crisp envelope with a look of concern. "This was just delivered by a courier, Mr. Gerard. For you personally." Gerard took the envelope. It was heavy, made of thick, expensive paper. The return address was for the Sharma and Associates Legal Clinic. He ripped it open, his brow furrowed. As he read, the colour drained from his face. The glass of scotch slipped from his trembling fingers and shattered on the floor, the amber liquid soaking into the plush carpet. The letter was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying. It detailed in precise legal language the events of the other night. It cited specific state and federal labor laws regarding wrongful termination, retaliation, and the creation of a hostile work environment. But it didn't stop there. The letter formally requested the preservation of all documents related to Miranda Olson's employment, as well as all payroll records, timesheets, and tip distribution logs for all employees for the past 3 years. It concluded by stating that if a satisfactory settlement was not reached within 10 business days, a lawsuit would be filed against Aurelia LLC, and that they would be seeking discovery related to any and all interactions with Mr. Hubert Calloway that may have influenced management decisions. Gerard's blood ran cold. The tip distribution logs. For years he'd been skimming a small, administrative fee off the top of the server's pooled tips, a practice he knew was legally dubious at best. It wasn't much, but over time it added up. It was a skeleton in his closet he thought was safely buried. This lawsuit threatened to dig it up. Panicked, he scrambled for his phone and dialed the one number he didn't want to call but had to. The personal assistant to Hubert Calloway. "He needs to know," Gerard muttered to himself, sweat beading on his forehead. "He caused this. He needs to fix it." Miles away in a glass tower that scraped the sky, Hubert Calloway was chairing a board meeting. He was in his element, dissecting quarterly reports with surgical precision, his voice cutting through the stale boardroom air. His phone, manned by his assistant in the antechamber, buzzed with the call from Gerard. When the meeting concluded, his assistant, a nervous young man named Paul, approached him cautiously. "Sir, a Mr. Gerard from Aurelia Restaurant called. He said it was an emergency." Calloway sighed, annoyed. "What now, did the dishwasher break?" "He was served with a legal notice, sir. It concerns the waitress from the other night, a Ms. Miranda Olson. Mr. Gerard forwarded a copy." Paul held out a tablet displaying the letter from Professor Sharma. Calloway snatched the tablet. He read the letter, his expression shifting from irritation to disbelief, and then to a dark, simmering amusement. A law student, a legal aid clinic. They were threatening him. The sheer audacity was almost comical. "Get Leonard Cromwell on the line," Calloway said, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "Tell him I have a pest problem that needs to be fumigated." Within the hour, Calloway was on a conference call with Leonard Cromwell, a 60-something legal titan whose tailored suits cost more than Miranda's tuition. And she's claiming hostile work environment. Cromwell chuckled his voice, a gravelly rumble. It's a nuisance suit, Hubert. A shakedown. We'll file a motion to dismiss bury them into paperwork. This Professor Sharma, I know of her. A bleeding heart idealist. She's no match for our resources. I don't want it dismissed, Leonard. Calloway said, his voice cold. I want her crushed. I want this student and her idealist professor to regret the day they ever learned how to spell my name. Countersue, defamation, tortious interference, whatever you can think of. Make an example of her. That could get expensive and noisy, Cromwell cautioned. It will draw press. Good, Calloway snapped. Let the press see what happens when a nobody tries to take a shot at me. Bury them. As you wish. Hubert. Cromwell said, the sound of a predator, sensing a kill in his voice. Consider them buried. Back at the legal clinic, the counterattack came faster than even Sharma had anticipated. A formidable package arrived from Cromwell, Dane and Associates. It contained a blistering rejection of their settlement, offer a threat of sanctions for filing a frivolous lawsuit, and notice of a countersuit against Miranda for defamation seeking damages that would bankrupt her family for generations. Miranda stared at the documents, the legal jargon and staggering numbers swimming before her eyes. The hope she had felt was being choked by pure terror. They're suing me, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's a classic strategy, Sharma said, calmly, though her eyes were hard. The strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAP suit. It's designed to intimidate and silence critics by overwhelming them with legal costs. They think we'll get scared and drop the case. Should we? Miranda asked, the weight of the threat pressing down on her. Absolutely not, Sharma said, her voice ringing with conviction. This is a gift. Cromwell is arrogant. He thinks he can bully us out of the courtroom. But in his haste to intimidate, he's opened the door for us. She tapped the countersuit papers. To defend you against a defamation claim, we are now entitled to discovery to prove that your statements were in fact true. We can depose anyone who was there. We can subpoena records. He's just handed us the justification to dig even deeper into Calloway's world. Sharma's gaze turned to the list of co-workers Miranda had compiled. It's time to find a friendly witness. Someone who saw what happened. Someone who knows about Gerard's creative accounting. Her finger landed on a name. Leo Kendrick. You said he was a friend. Yes, Miranda said, but he's timid. He has a family. He was terrified that night. Fear is a powerful motivator, Sharma said. But so is doing the right thing, and so is the prospect of getting years of stolen wages back. Let's arrange a meeting with Mr. Kendrick. Off the record, of course. The meeting took place in a quiet coffee shop far from Aurelia. Leo Kendrick was a bundle of nerves, constantly looking over his shoulder. He listened as Sharma explained the situation, his hand shaking as he stirred his coffee. I can't, he said, finally his voice low. Gerard would fire me. Calloway. Man, you don't know what guys like that can do. We do, Sharma said gently. That's why we're fighting back. Miranda was fired for standing up for herself. You and the other staff are having your wages garnished illegally. Gerard only has power over you because you're divided. If you stand together, you have the power. It's my word against theirs, Leo mumbled. Not just yours, Sharma countered. Your testimony combined with the payroll records we're going to get will be damning for Gerard. He'll be facing his own legal battle. You'd be a witness in a lawsuit protected by law against retaliation. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a preliminary calculation of the amount Gerard likely skimmed from his tips over the past 3 years. That's what he's stolen from you. We can get it back. For you and for everyone else." Leo stared at the number. It was enough for a down payment on a house, enough to give his kids the things he couldn't afford. He looked at Miranda, at her tired but determined face. He remembered the sickening feeling in his stomach as he watched her get fired, how he had stood by and done nothing. He took a deep breath, his decision made. "Okay," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "What do you need me to do?" Anya Sharma smiled. The first crack in the fortress had appeared. They now had an inside man. The fishing expedition was about to begin in earnest, and they had no idea just how big the monster lurking in the depths truly was. The discovery process was a war of attrition. Cromwell's firm dumped thousands of pages of documents on Sharma's small clinic, most of them irrelevant, a tactic designed to exhaust their limited resources. But Sharma and her team of dedicated students, with Miranda at the forefront, were relentless. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose sifting through every piece of paper. Leo's testimony had been the key. Armed with his specific allegations about the administrative fee, Sharma was able to file a motion to compel Gerard to produce the unredacted tip-out sheets and internal financial records. Cromwell fought it, but the judge, seeing the clear evidence presented in Leo's sworn affidavit, granted the motion. When the documents arrived, it was the smoking gun. Gerard's scheme was laid bare in black and white, a systematic illegal skimming of nearly 15% of his staff's hard-earned tips. The case against Aurelia was now rock solid. Gerard was trapped. But Sharma wasn't just focused on Gerard. The countersuit against Miranda gave her license to investigate Hubert Calloway. While one team of students built the wage theft case, Sharma assigned another smaller team to a different task, a deep dive into Calloway innovations. "I don't care about his stock prices or his product launches," Sharma instructed them. "I want to know where the bodies are buried. Look for regulatory fines, environmental complaints, disgruntled former executives' sealed lawsuits. A man with an ego that fragile usually has secrets he's protecting." Miranda threw herself into the research. It was a welcome distraction from the stress of the lawsuit and her precarious financial situation. She spent hours in the law library's database, cross-referencing news articles, court filings, and EPA reports. For weeks, she found nothing but the usual corporate maneuverings, minor workplace lawsuits, settled out of court, predictable lobbying efforts. Calloway's corporate armor was polished and thick. Then she found a footnote in an obscure environmental law journal. It mentioned a series of small but persistent protests a few years back near a Calloway Innovations microchip manufacturing plant. The article was brief, dismissing the protests as unsubstantiated local activism, but it listed the location of the plant: Oak Creek. Miranda froze, her blood turning to ice. Her breath caught in her throat. Oak Creek was her hometown. It was a small, forgotten town in the Rust Belt, the kind of place people leave, but never quite escape. It was where she had grown up, where her parents still lived. It was where Zoe had gotten sick. Zoe's illness, a rare and aggressive form of leukemia, wasn't an isolated case. Over the past decade, Oak Creek had become a cancer cluster. Dozens of people, many of them children who had played in the same creeks and parks as Miranda, and Zoe had been diagnosed with similar rare cancers. The community was devastated, but they had no answers. Doctors called it a statistical anomaly, a tragic coincidence. The residents suspected something else. They suspected the water, the air, the soil, but they could never prove it. They were a poor town with no resources to fight a faceless, invisible enemy. Now that enemy had a face and a name: Hubert Calloway. Her hands shaking, Miranda started digging with a new, terrifying urgency. This was no longer academic. It was personal. She searched for Callaway Innovations and Oak Creek. She found local news archives forum posts from concerned citizens and minutes from town hall meetings. A pattern emerged. The Callaway plant had opened 15 years ago, hailed as an economic savior for the struggling town. About 5 years after it opened, the first strange illnesses began to appear. The company used a variety of powerful industrial solvents and chemical agents in its manufacturing process. They had always claimed to adhere to and even exceed EPA standards. But Miranda found a mention of a sealed lawsuit filed by a former plant safety manager 8 years ago. The case was dropped abruptly, and the manager had signed a strict non-disclosure agreement. Then she found a geological survey map. The Callaway plant was located directly upstream from the town's primary aquifer. Any chemical runoff or leakage would go directly into the water supply. She pulled up the timeline of Zoe's illness. Her symptoms had started 7 years ago. It all fit. The timing, the location, the secrecy. It was a horrifying, gut-wrenching puzzle, and the final piece had just clicked into place. The man who had humiliated her, who had gotten her fired over a few drops of wine, was very likely the same man whose company had poisoned her sister. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She stumbled back from the computer, gasping for air, a wave of nausea and white-hot rage washing over her. The lawsuit, her job, her pride, it all seemed so insignificant now. This was so much bigger. This was about justice for Zoe, for the children of Oak Creek, for an entire community that had been treated as collateral damage in Callaway's relentless pursuit of profit. She ran to Professor Sharma's office, clutching a handful of printed documents, her face pale and streaked with tears. She burst through the door without knocking. "Professor," she gasped, her voice choked with emotion. "I found it. I know what he's hiding." Sharma looked up, startled by Miranda's state. Miranda slammed the papers down on the desk. "The Callaway plant, in my hometown. It's my sister Zoe. It's all of them. He did this." Sharma's eyes scanned the documents, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to a cold, focused intensity. She read about the cancer cluster, saw the map of the aquifer, and understood the horrifying implications of the sealed lawsuit. She looked up at Miranda, seeing not just a student or a client, but a young woman standing at the epicenter of a monstrous injustice. "Miranda." Sharma said, her voice soft but firm, cutting through the panic. "Take a breath. We have to be smart about this." She stood up and began pacing the office, her mind already working, formulating a new strategy. This changes everything. The wrongful termination suit is no longer the main event. It's the leverage. Her eyes narrowed. Cromwell thinks he's fighting a nuisance case over a waitress's hurt feelings. He has no idea what's coming. We're not just going to win your case, Miranda. We're going to expose him. We're going to get justice for Oak Creek. The battle lines had been redrawn. This was no longer about a single incident in a fancy restaurant. It was about a war that had been silently raging for over a decade, and Miranda Olson, the fired waitress from Oak Creek, was now leading the charge. The discovery of the Oak Creek connection transformed the legal clinic into a command center for a two-front war. On one front, they continued to press the advantage against Mr. Gerard. On the other, they began a clandestine operation to build a case against Callaway Innovations. Anya Sharma made a calculated decision. They couldn't introduce the Oak Creek evidence into the current lawsuit directly. It would be deemed irrelevant to the wrongful termination claim and thrown out. The information was their hidden trump card to be played at the perfect moment. Their public strategy remained focused on the restaurant. Sharma scheduled a deposition for David Gerard. His lawyer, a small-time local attorney clearly out of his depth, advised him to answer every question truthfully, but minimally. It was a disaster for them. In a sterile conference room, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Sharma dismantled him. She was surgical. "Mr. Gerard, can you confirm that Aurelia's policy is to pool all tips and distribute them to the staff?" "Yes." "And from this pool you deduct a 15% administrative fee before distribution, correct?" Gerard squirmed. We withhold a fee for operational costs, breakage uniforms." "Is this fee disclosed in writing to your employees upon hiring Mr. Gerard?" "It's a verbal understanding. A verbal understanding that allows you to skim nearly $50,000 a year from your employees' wages." Sharma slid the ledger across the table. "Is that correct?" Gerard's face went ashen. His lawyer frantically whispered for a recess. After that deposition, the dynamic shifted entirely. Gerard was terrified. He was facing a class action lawsuit from his entire staff that would bankrupt him and potential criminal charges for wage theft. The powerful shield of Hubert Calloway was nowhere to be seen. Calloway's lawyers had made it clear the restaurant's problems were its own. Sharma saw her opening. She approached Gerard's lawyer with a deal. "Your client is in an impossible position," she said coolly. "But we are not after him. We are after the man who put him there. Have Mr. Gerard provide a sworn affidavit detailing the full conversation he had with Mr. Calloway on the night Miranda was fired. The threats, the pressure, everything. In return, we will negotiate a more manageable settlement for the wage theft claim on behalf of the employees." It was a lifeline, and Gerard snatched it. His affidavit was damning. It painted a vivid picture of Calloway's tirade, his explicit threat to destroy Gerard's business, and his direct order to fire Miranda for her insolence. It was a clear-cut case of tortious interference. Calloway hadn't just influenced the decision, he had dictated it under duress. Simultaneously, Sharma's team was making headway on other fronts. They managed to track down Bridget Calloway's date from that night. After Calloway's public humiliation of Miranda, Bridget had ended things with him disgusted by his cruelty. Reluctantly at first, then, with growing conviction, she agreed to provide a statement, corroborating Miranda's version of events, detailing Calloway's vindictive and abusive language. The walls were closing in around the wrongful termination suit. Cromwell's strategy of aggressive denial was crumbling under the weight of the evidence. Meanwhile, the secret war, the Oak Creek investigation, was yielding its own dark fruit. Sharma, using clinic funds and a grant for environmental justice cases, hired a private investigator, a grizzled retired detective named Frank. His job was to find the safety manager who had filed the sealed lawsuit against Calloway Innovations 8 years ago. Frank found him living in a different state, under a slightly different name. The man named Robert Fletcher was haunted and fearful. The NDA he had signed was ironclad, and he was terrified of Calloway's retribution. Sharma and Miranda flew out to meet him. In a quiet motel room, Sharma laid out the situation. "We're not asking you to break your NDA, Mr. Fletcher," she explained. "Not yet. But we know the company was improperly disposing of chemical solvents. We have water sample analysis from independent labs showing traces of those same chemicals in the Oak Creek aquifer. What we need is someone to point us to the specific evidence." Fletcher was torn. He looked at Miranda, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "I have a daughter her age," he said quietly. He told them how he had repeatedly warned Calloway's plant manager about faulty lining in the chemical waste ponds. His warnings were ignored. He was told to falsify the records. When he refused, he was fired and threatened until he signed the NDA in exchange for a meager settlement. "I can't testify," he said, his voice shaking. "They'll ruin me. But if I were a lawyer looking for proof, I'd subpoena the maintenance and waste disposal logs from 2010 to 2015, specifically from a third-party contractor they used called Tri-State Environmental. Callaway's internal logs were faked. The contractor's logs won't be. It was the final piece of the puzzle. They now had a direct path to the evidence. Back at the clinic, Sharma made her boldest move yet. She contacted a well-known investigative journalist, Ronan Hale of the New York Journal, famous for his exposés on corporate crime. She fed him the story off the record, providing him with the wage theft evidence, Gerard's affidavit, and Bridget's statement. "This is the story I'm giving you now," Sharma told him. "A billionaire's ego gets a waitress fired, exposing a pattern of abuse and wage theft at a high-end restaurant. It's a great human interest piece." Then she leaned in. "But the real story," she said, her voice low, "is what we're going to find next. Keep an eye on Callaway Innovations and a little town called Oak Creek. When the dam breaks, you'll get the first call." The pressure was now mounting on multiple fronts. Cromwell Dane and Associates, once so confident, found themselves on the defensive. Their countersuit for defamation was dead in the water, thanks to the corroborating testimony. The case against Gerard was solid. An embarrassing news story was imminent. They approached Sharma with a settlement offer for Miranda, $50,000, and a non-disclosure agreement. Miranda and Sharma looked at the offer in Sharma's office. A year ago, that amount of money would have changed Miranda's life. It would have paid for a full year of Zoe's treatment. "They're scared," Sharma said. "They want to make this go away before Hale's article comes out and before we dig any deeper." Miranda looked at the check, then thought of Robert Fletcher's fearful face and Zoe's tired smile. She thought of the families in Oak Creek who still had no answers. She pushed the offer back across the desk. "Tell them it's not enough," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Tell them this was never about the money. Tell them I want a face-to-face meeting." With Hubert Callaway. Sharma raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across her face. "An interesting move. You want to face the lion in his den. He started this by refusing to look at me, by treating me like I was nothing," Miranda said. "This will end with him looking me in the eye as his world comes down around him. I want to be in the room when it happens." Sharma nodded, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Then that's what we'll demand. A final settlement conference, all parties present." The trap was set. All they needed now was for the lion to walk into it. The law offices of Cromwell Dane and Associates were designed to convey power. Situated on the top 2 floors of a skyscraper, they offered panoramic views of the city, a landscape Callaway considered his kingdom. The conference room was vast, dominated by a polished mahogany table that felt a mile long. Hubert Callaway sat at the head of the table, flanked by Leonard Cromwell and a team of 3 other lawyers. He was the picture of arrogant nonchalance, scrolling through his phone as if the meeting were a minor inconvenience. He had been assured by Cromwell that this was a final formality, a chance to stare down the little waitress and her pro bono professor before signing a check and burying the whole affair. On the other side of the table sat Miranda Professor Anya Sharma and a junior associate from the clinic. To Callaway they looked small and insignificant against the backdrop of his corporate might. He didn't even bother to look up when they entered. Mr. Gerard was also present, seated at the far end of the table, with his own lawyer looking pale and diminished. Cromwell cleared his throat, initiating the proceedings. "We are here," he began in his booming voice, "to finalize the terms of a separation agreement regarding Ms. Olson's employment with Aurelia. My client, Mr. Callaway, who is here only as an accommodation, has graciously contributed to a settlement offer of $100,000 in exchange for a full release of all claims and a permanent binding non-disclosure agreement. He had doubled the previous offer, a number he was certain would end things. Professor Sharma smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Cromwell. However, we are not here to discuss that offer. We are here to present the full scope of our complaint before we proceed to trial." Cromwell scoffed. "A trial? On what grounds? You have a witness who was fired for insubordination and a restaurateur with sloppy bookkeeping. It's a nuisance." "Let's list the nuisances, shall we?" Sharma said, her voice calm and sharp. She laid out a folder on the table. "First, we have the wrongful termination of my client, Miss Olson, directly instigated by your client's threats against Mr. Gerard, a fact to which Mr. Gerard has testified under oath." She nodded towards the terrified owner. Calloway looked up from his phone for the first time, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Second," Sharma continued, "we have the class action wage theft claim against Aurelia, a direct consequence of the environment of fear your client fostered. The financial liability for that alone will bankrupt the restaurant." "That is Gerard's problem, not ours," Cromwell interjected. "Is it?" Sharma countered. "When the press gets a hold of the story, and they will, the headline won't be, 'Restaurateur steals tips.' It will be, 'Billionaire's tirade exposes crime at elite eatery.' Your client's brand is built on an image of perfection and power. This story makes him look like a petty, abusive bully." Calloway's jaw tightened. He put his phone down. "And finally," Sharma said, "there is the matter of the countersuit for defamation you so foolishly filed against my client." She opened another folder. "We have a sworn statement from Ms. Bridget Parker, who confirms every detail of your client's verbal abuse. We were prepared to depose every patron sitting near table 7 that night. Your suit is not only baseless, it's malicious prosecution. The damages for that alone will far exceed your settlement offer." Cromwell's confident facade began to crack. He had underestimated Sharma. He had thought her a mere idealist, not a grandmaster playing chess 3 moves ahead. "This is all circumstantial," he stammered. Calloway finally spoke, his voice dripping with contempt. "Enough of this. What do you want? 200,000? 500? Name a price. Everyone has one." He directed this at Miranda, his eyes boring into her, expecting her to crumble. Miranda met his gaze without flinching. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. "You're right," she said. "I do have a price. It's not something you can buy." She looked at Professor Sharma, who gave a subtle nod. The time had come. "Mr. Calloway," Sharma said, her tone shifting, becoming grave, "we need to discuss another matter. A manufacturing plant owned by Calloway Innovations in a small town called Oak Creek." The name hung in the air. For the first time, a genuine emotion crossed Hubert Calloway's face. Not anger, not arrogance, but a flash of pure, cold shock. Cromwell looked at his client, then back at Sharma, completely bewildered. What does that have to do with anything? In the course of our discovery for the defamation suit, Sharma lied smoothly. We began looking into Mr. Calloway's broader business practices to establish a pattern of behavior, and we found some disturbing connections. She slid a thick new binder to the center of the table. We found a town suffering from a statistically impossible cancer cluster that began shortly after your plant opened. A plant located directly upstream from the town's aquifer. She continued, her voice like ice. We found a sealed lawsuit from a former safety manager, Robert Fletcher, who we have located and spoken with. We know he was fired for refusing to falsify waste disposal records. and based on his information, we have subpoenaed the records from your third-party disposal contractor, Tri-State Environmental. Those records, Mr. Calloway, show illegal dumping of carcinogenic solvents over a period of 5 years. The room was utterly silent. Calloway's face was a deathly pale mask. Cromwell stared at the binder as if it were a venomous snake. "We have water sample analysis," Sharma pressed on. "We have medical records. We have a direct causal link. We have a story that will not just tarnish your brand, but will lead to congressional hearings, EPA investigations, and shareholder lawsuits that will cripple Calloway Innovations. It will lead to criminal charges. Manslaughter, perhaps." She paused, letting the weight of the word settle in the opulent room. And at the center of it all, she said, her gaze shifting to Miranda, "is the young woman you had fired. A woman who grew up in Oak Creek." Calloway finally turned his head and truly looked at Miranda. He saw not a waitress, not a function, but the architect of his ruin. He saw the face of a ghost from a town he had written off as a cost of doing business. "My sister Zoe has leukemia," Miranda said, her voice thick with emotion but unwavering. "She used to play in Miller's Creek, the water that runs right past your factory. You didn't just spill wine on a tablecloth, Mr. Calloway. You spilled poison into the lives of my entire town. You did this to my sister." The dam broke. The arrogance, the power, the billions, it all evaporated, leaving only a trapped, defeated man. Hubert Calloway, the titan of industry, slumped in his chair. "What do you want?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Here is our price," Sharma said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. It wasn't a settlement. It was a list of terms. 1. A public apology to Miranda Olson. 2. Full payment of the class action settlement for the employees of Aurelia. 3. Establishment of a $500 million compensation fund for the victims of the Oak Creek Cancer Cluster. 4. The funding of an independent environmental cleanup of the town's water supply. 5. A personal, untraceable settlement for Miranda Olson and her family to ensure the best medical care for Zoe for the rest of her life. The amount was left blank. Calloway stared at the list. It was not a negotiation. It was an unconditional surrender. He looked at Cromwell, whose face was grim. There was no way out. Sharma and Miranda had him. He picked up a pen, his hand shaking, and filled in an 8-figure number in the blank space. Then he signed the document. The war was over. In the end, it wasn't about the money. For Miranda Olson, the victory wasn't the number Calloway wrote on that paper. It was the justice that number represented. The fund she helped create provided real care for the families of Oak Creek people who had suffered in silence for years. It paid for Zoe to see the best doctors in the world, giving her a fighting chance she never would have had. Hubert Calloway's empire was shaken to its core, and he became a poster child for corporate evil, his name forever linked with the town he poisoned. Miranda finished law school at the top of her class. She didn't join a fancy corporate firm. Instead, she used her settlement to start a foundation, a legal powerhouse dedicated to fighting for people just like her, against bullies just like Calloway. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that no one is beneath notice, and no one is above accountability. One person armed with the truth and the courage to speak it can indeed change the world. What do you think of Miranda's incredible journey? Have you ever felt powerless against a bigger force? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of justice and empowerment. Thank you for listening.